The headline is ShotSpotter creates thousands of dead-end police deployments that find no evidence of actual gunfire. This is a news story that we're about to watch from CBS 2, Megan Hickey. I'm going to play the whole thing. It's 5:50, runs just about 6 minutes because I want to talk about several aspects of it. I have, and I voiced them a little bit earlier, we're going to go more in depth tonight. I have my issues with the analysis that was done by the MacArthur Justice Center. I think there's some context missing. I am not a fan of ShotSpotter. I don't think, there's no good evidence on either side, either on ShotSpotter side or the activist legal side, that whether or not ShotSpotter works. There's an attempt by abolitionists, which CJP is not. There's an attempt by abolitionists to say the Adam Toledo pursuit, and the fact that cops are even called, is horrible, and it's not on either side. Right? Just quickly, Adam Toledo, the man he was with, whose name I don't remember, he shot at a car that night at 8, and he fired like 8 rounds at a car occupied, moving car that was occupied. ShotSpotter noticed it, called the police. So in that time, and then alerted the police. ShotSpotter worked. Besides the fact that they got at least three follow-up 911 calls. So the cops were going there anyways. I think there's plenty of issues with ShotSpotter. Let's go into the segment, and then we'll come back on the other side and we'll talk about it.
Chicago's $33 million contract with ShotSpotter, a high-tech gunshot detection system that sends police hunting for gunfire in seconds.
With accusations it doesn't work and targets certain communities, the MacArthur Justice Center at Northwestern University is asking a Cook County judge to examine its reliability for court cases.
CBS 2 investigator Megan Hickey on if it's worth the price.
That's semi-automatic, and then they switch to full.
By now, you may have noticed these sensors. They're deployed over 117 square miles of the city, spanning 12 police districts.
ShotSpotter. It senses gunshots fired in the area.
ShotSpotter uses a series of microphones and sensors to detect gunfire. Officers responded to a ShotSpotter alert near Spalding and Ohio Street, and in recent years has become a crucial tool for the Chicago Police Department.
Because ShotSpotter is so accurate in real time, the officers can they arrive to the scene somewhere between 5 and 7 minutes before a 911 call.
The technology has helped law enforcement get victims help sooner, identify witnesses, and collect important evidence. But it's also been the genesis for some dangerous, even tragic encounters.
You heard the train screech, like come to a screech and stop, and it was like, wow.
On a cold December night in 2018, a 26-year-old man fired test shots into the air on the city's south side.
ShotSpotter alert.
But ShotSpotter picked up the sound of the shots, and that's why officers Gary and Marmolejo were dispatched, sparking a chain of events that ended with 2 Chicago police officers being fatally hit by a train that they didn't hear coming.
Yeah, there was about 7 or 8 gunshots fired on the 2300 block of South Sawyer.
ShotSpotter also brought police to Little Village on March 29th. Within 5 minutes of the 2:36 a.m. alert, Officer Eric Stillman shot and killed 13-year-old Adam Toledo. The still frame of Toledo's hands up in the air right before the shot made ripples across the country. So here's the question. While it can be an incredibly useful tool, does ShotSpotter create more opportunities for dangerous and sometimes tragic outcomes?
One important thing about ShotSpotter,
Jonathan Manis of the MacArthur Justice Center says yes.
It's clear that the system creates a sort of powder keg situation.
Manis' team analyzed OEMC ShotSpotter data from July 2019 through April 2021 and found that well over 85% of ShotSpotter-initiated police deployments in Chicago turn up no evidence of any reportable incident or crime, let alone gun crime.
So the police are going into that situation expecting to find somebody who's armed and who has just fired a gun. And if 9 times out of 10 they end up finding nothing, I mean, that creates a pretty dangerous situation for anybody who happens to be in the vicinity.
Manes also notes that the majority of cameras are installed in neighborhoods with largely Black and Latinx populations.
It exacerbates the sort of racialized and aggressive patterns of policing.
The Office of the Cook County Public Defender has also probed ShotSpotter's effectiveness in Chicago, citing a lack of independent testing into the rate of false positives, which is why their lawyers have recently filed legal challenges to the admissibility of ShotSpotter evidence in criminal trials. 2 other studies, one in St. Louis and another in Philadelphia, found that gunshot detection systems do not result in reductions in violent crime.
So in your opinion, do you think that the ShotSpotter system is worth $33 million of taxpayer money?
I think it's hard to justify spending $33 million on a tool that sends police hunting for non-existent gunfire almost 9 times out of 10.
But that decision won't be up to researchers. It's in the hands of the Chicago City Council. Alderman Christopher Taliaferro is the chair of the Public Safety Committee.
We can't blame ShotSpotter for what happened to Mr. Toledo. We do need police reform, and we are still in the process of reforming our police department.
Taliaferro, a former police officer himself, says the ShotSpotter technology performed as it should have the night that Adam Toledo was killed. It's what happened after that should be scrutinized.
Do you believe ShotSpotter is worth taxpayer money?
I do believe it, because we're saving lives with it. The technology also aids our police department in being able to attend victims much sooner.
Today, Mayor Lori Lightfoot was in agreement, believing the benefits outweigh the drawbacks highlighted by the MacArthur Justice Center.
Obviously, like with any contract, we need to make sure that we are continually evaluating it to making sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck.
Chicago police declined to make anyone available for an interview on this topic, but in a statement said in part, ShotSpotter has detected hundreds of shootings that would have otherwise gone unreported. The Chicago Police Department's expansion of ShotSpotter is helping us reduce crime and make our neighborhoods safer. ShotSpotter has a contract with about 100 U.S. cities, including Miami, San Francisco, Las Vegas, and New York. ShotSpotter also declined our request for an on-camera interview, although we did send those top-line findings from the MacArthur Justice Center well in advance of this story running. ShotSpotter spokesperson didn't specifically address those bullet points, but sent us a statement saying in part our technology fills the gap when nationally nearly 80% of gunfire isn't reported to 911, deploying officers to crime in real time, saving lives. In the loop, Megan Hickey, CBS 2 Investigators.
Okay, so we're back. First of all, Megan Hickey, using your own words to say it's a crucial tool for police in Chicago. You should quote them saying that, but don't just ferret it back like it is. The jury is out for sure. And as the report says, it has been problematic in areas. ShotSpotter doesn't release any data, so it's very hard to track it. They basically, in the contracts, make sure they control as much of the data about what it does as possible. They don't want people looking at it. It is not 95%. It may be 95% accurate in that it picks up 95% of the gunfire. That I would believe, maybe even higher. But what it doesn't do is, as well as it should, is distinguish between other sounds and gunfire. That is really where the problem is. I don't get this report from Megan Hickey because the couple of examples they used, that the CTA one where the cops got hit by the train and Adam Toledo, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, those were shootings. What the people at MacArthur Justice are talking about is that there's fireworks or something going off, and this computer system is telling the cops it's a shooting there, and they go rush there, and there's bad results. But that's not what Madam Hickey, she tried to allude to dangerous situations. Yeah, shootings are dangerous. That's why we employ cops. I'm sorry. That's one of the reasons. So yes, I'm kind of lost to why she showed those examples. They're kind of meaningless. Toledo, once again, red herring. Don't go down that rabbit hole. I was kind of shocked about Lightfoot and Taliaferro so committed to that $33 million. Lightfoot's bullshit, and that's what it was. It was BS about we're going to look at that contract like we do with all others. No, she's not. No, that's just, it's bad. Real quick, before we go on to a couple of the images from the analysis that the MacArthur Justice Center did, it's not they don't give you detailed methodology as much as we would like, but it's not terrible. It just isn't as good as it could be. Last thing I want to talk about, Jonathan Maines, which is how I think you pronounce his name, from MacArthur Justice. It has police hunting non-existent gunfire. Possible. And maybe we don't need to spend the money. That's also possible and probably more probable. I would have liked more of a nuanced evaluation about the role that 911 calls play and whether ShotSpotter sends cops to how many more shootings that come just from 911. I think it's a lot more, so that may have part of it. But anyways, let's look at a couple images here from the the report. Yeah, I don't have images. Okay, so we won't be looking at them. Let me just give you some numbers. Part of what the MacArthur Justice Center is doing is claiming every time there isn't the big flaw in the studies, they say every time there's not a police report filled, every time that ShotSpotter says there was gunfire and the police respond, there's a call for service generated. That's what it's called. Every time there's a call for service, but there isn't a matching crime incident report for gunfire or arrest report for gunfire, that gunshot did not occur. There was no gunshot. And that's just not right. It isn't. There are many, most, if not the vast majority, if not 80, 90% normally, of shootings where there is a shooting, and if the person isn't hit, sometimes even when the person is hit, but if the person isn't hit, both the shooter and the victim in that case, in that incident, they're gone. They're not waiting around for police to show up. They don't want to interact with police. So to say every time there's a shooting that there isn't a subsequent report that that's somehow unfounded or not a shooting or not worthy of sending police to is wrong. And my big problem is that they can't ferret out with any reliability the difference in the numbers. Like, all right, ShotSpotter said there were the shootings and this many, and we had this many police reports, so that we have this number, we know we're right. And then everything else where ShotSpotter sent them to a scene, said there was a shooting, sent them to the scene, and they didn't come back with a police report for a shooting or a gun-related crime. That's a unfounded gunshot, and that's not true. And they can't, because this isn't really deep social science research, they can't ferret out that difference there. And that's what we really need to know. That wasn't done here. I still think, the research is pretty good, but that's a big problem. That isn't it. It just isn't it. We need to know what that in-between number is. Shootings that happen that people don't stick around for. It's hard to prove, but I bet you a good social science researcher could ferret that number out. Also, they rely on the closing code in the OEMC data. So when someone calls 911, or for instance, let's do a 911 call, even a ShotSpotter may be the same thing here. In a 911 call, the operator tries to get information from the caller to tell people so they can tell the cops what's going on. Oh, there's a shooting. Where's it at? Great, we're sending officers. So they give it a code or some kind of active related to shooting, right? When the cops get on the scene, at some point thereafter, not right after, by the way, depending on the scene, they may radio in, yeah, there's a shooting, there's still shooting, or yes, we have a victim, so it's a bona fide shooting, or we have shell casings or whatever. But a lot of the times, there's a saying in the police department, 19 Paul closes them all. One I just learned recently, which basically is used by officers to clear a bunch of calls for service where they didn't really find anything necessarily, or nothing they deem worthy of being in a report. Those closing codes, which is, yes, we have an opening code. This is what OEMC or now ShotSpotter said happened. The caller said happened. Now we need to know what exactly did the officers find. Those are notoriously unreliable in Chicago. So that's a problem in the research. I have issues with ShotSpotter, no doubt about it. I think it was interesting with Talafario talking about how it, because it's an automatic and you don't have to wait for a person to call and then a person to take the call, get all the information, and then send it to police officers, that they get it pretty much almost simultaneously. They're dispatched almost simultaneously through ShotSpotter. The cops are getting the scenes much quicker than they normally would. Eddie Johnson in that, for whatever it's worth, said 5 to 7 minutes. I'm not sure how scientifically based that is, but it's at least a couple minutes probably quicker than they would have just responding to 911 calls. They're getting there to help victims. That may be true. And I think that's worthy of consideration. I don't think I love it, but I think it's worthy of consideration when you're ripping ShotSpotter, which I think for the most part deserves to be ripped. Okay.